Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 001 of the Imperial Tides podcast. I'm your host, the great and powerful 21st century Holden Caulfield, and I'm joined today by the illustrious, eminent Simone of the Philippines. How are you doing today, Simone?
Hello, I'm fine, Mr. Holden.
It's good. It's great.
Everything's fine.
That's good to hear. We have just finished watching a really interesting film. It ran for about an hour and 40 minutes. It was free on YouTube. It's called Edna, the Inebriate Woman, 1971. It was part of the Play for Today series that some company, I had it pulled up. Now I don't have it. Do me a favor, do me a favor real quick, Simone. Just talk to me about this. How did you feel about it? What did you think? Just give me some of your initial thoughts about the film.
I think it's a reality that we neglect in today's in today.
I would agree with that. Okay.
The reality that everyone don't want to care about. I think so.
Why? Because it's uncomfortable?
Yes, everyone, but people are only dwelling on the comfortable part of their life. That's why
It's
the
interesting.
issue is not
That's an
brought up.
yeah, yeah. That's an interesting idea, and we will get to that in just a moment. But first, I just for a little bit of context, this was part of the Play for Today series. It was a British Play for Today. If you don't know, for those of you out there who may not know, it was a British television anthology drama series produced by the BBC and transmitted on BBC One from 1970 to 1984. During the program, more than 300 more than 300 programs, including original television plays and adaptations of stage plays and novels, were transmitted. And Edna, the Inebriate Woman, was one of those plays. It stars Patricia Hayes as the titular Edna, and it was written by an award-winning screenwriter, Christopher Jeremy Sanford, who also wrote Kathy Come Home, which is actually another famous kind of Play for Today about homelessness. Again, homelessness in the United Kingdom. This Edna, however, was first broadcast on the 21st of October, 1971, on BBC One. Although Simone and I watched it for free on YouTube. Uh, Now, I guess just to kind of to get into it a little more. Um, Again, let's start with some initial remarks. So, if you have any notes, feel free to pull them up, Simone. But I kind of want to know, just what did you think about the whole thing overall? What was your experience watching it? What was going through your mind as you were, experiencing the film that is Edna, the Inebriate Woman? Talk to me about it.
It's really uncomfortable, and that the things are always been the same since the start of the movie, a never ending change for place to stay with or stay the night with. Uh, it's it's uncomfortable that probably these things are still happening in the United Kingdom, not only in the United Kingdom, probably around the world right now, knowing
Well,
that this pandemic might brought these things.
right. So, so you're from the Philippines. How common would you say homelessness is in your country?
Um, there are a lot of um, homeless people here, but not exactly as in the movie, because usually these people are uh, making other house in the outskirts of the town. Living in some squatter areas. I think
Oh, so they
they
have
don't.
like little shanty towns that they like set up for themselves, kind of like I mean that's kind of similar to how they were living under the bridge, though, right? You would say.
Yeah, but still they have something to get a living with. For example, some works. For example, being a jeepney barker calling up passengers or some sort of have some some way to get a living, not only dependent to the people around them,
So,
only
but
begging for food or money.
oh, okay. So how do they get the jobs though? Do you know like what the process is for that? Do they go to some government office or something and like go through a process, like do some paperwork, whatever, and then someone sets them up with a job, and that's how they provide for themselves, even though they're still homeless. Like they can still work, and how does that work? Do you know exactly what the process is behind that?
Uh, it's not actually you don't need to get to the government to have a proper work here or something. Um, Call some employment jobs, for example, for these people buy some candies or some cigarette and then put a little 20% markup and then they sell it to the people that they live with or some strangers on the street and then they now make a living.
Oh, so they have
Simple
like
as that.
side hustles and stuff like that. You mean?
Oh yeah. Sometimes these homeless people are very family.
Okay. So their little community, it kind of has like well, I don't want to say, I don't mean to be disparaging when I say little, but you know what I mean. They kind of they it's like a sort of ecosystem in the sense that they all sort of help each other, and it's this issue of like like reciprocal, yeah, maybe codependence or what have you. Like they look out for each other. It's kind of like one big family, perhaps. It's just the homeless neighborhood could be seen perhaps as like a pretty much like a regular neighborhood almost, with the exception that they're living in extreme poverty. But still, I mean, there's a community sense, you say.
Oh yes, it was.
And do you think that's because the Filipino culture is very like family centric and community driven, or do you think it's more a matter of some sort of mutual need to survive over there? Because in the U.S. especially, I mean, like it's not really a lot of homeless people are they attack it. It's a dog eat dog world out there. People are starving and stuff, so they're not usually very nice to each other. The people in the movie were actually a lot nicer than I thought they would be. The homeless people with each other, I thought there would be a lot more fighting and bloodshed, I guess, for instance. But it wasn't very present in the movie. But is there a lot of that in the Philippines? Is there a lot of violence among homeless people? And do you think more importantly, do you think that the family community or whatever, that aspect of it comes from the culture itself, or is it more biological and universal perhaps? What would you say on that?
I think the family sense of the of living as a family in uh, the homelessness suburbs of the town gets more on the culture. For example, you can see that homelessness is not is it's too usual in the world. For example, the U.S., the United Kingdom, everyone, every country has homeless people. So this might be the reason why these people are having the sense of family because it might be because of the culture, Filipino culture. Even though they're not related by blood, they consider each other as a family. So that's it.
Interesting,
Uh,
interesting.
about the violence, it's not actually normal to be violent. I think they are in a family and there's a family. Then some sense of some feuds are out there, but um, still, the end of the day, get back together as a family. I think.
Are you saying the violence isn't common for the Filipino homeless, or for like all homeless in general?
Um, it wasn't like common. I think it's just a simple misunderstanding that actually a violence for an eye for an or an eye or a dog for a dog or something like.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, when you say that, are you referring to like, are you saying that it's not common in the Philippines, or is it, or that it's not common in the world? What's the scale we're working here with here
Violence here is, I think it's not common.
in the Philippines?
So, mm, Yeah, it's not that common.
Okay. Yeah, that's all. That's all I need to know. Okay. I don't have any frame of reference for that, so I'll just have to take your word on it. But it's very interesting. It's interesting. Uh, okay. You know what? Before we get into like a deep dive into I guess the finer points of the film, I want you right now to tell me what you would rate it out of 10 and why. You can go first, and then I'll follow up.
Uh, I'll give it a 9.
A 9 out of
Maybe
10.
because 9 out of a 9 out of 10, because I'm still looking for something about the background of Edna, or who she really is, or where she get background. I mean, the small scene about her childhood is not enough for that thing.
You don't think they fleshed out her background enough?
Mm. There's something about they didn't show about her youth, or her being her adolescence or adulthood,
Yeah.
just her childhood.
I was honestly surprised that they had that scene at all. I didn't think that we're going to talk about it throughout the entire film. I thought it was just going to end with her being completely unknown to the viewer. Because they made a big deal about that earlier when the woman was talking to her in her jail cell for the first time, I believe. Uh, and she didn't want to talk about her past because it was so traumatizing to her or whatever. I thought that was going to be the most we got out of it. Also, the beginning, the scene at the beginning where she didn't have any identification, they asked for her ID, her permanent name, and she didn't want to give it to her. And the fact that she changes her name constantly, by the way. I mean, her first name's Edna, but her last name, it was, there was a point where it was McLean, there was a point where it was Rogers. She her identity changes based on who she's around and what part of the country she's in, who she's talking to, because she needs to, she uses that. She takes advantage of her anonymity to get her, little, little helpings here and there. It's not much, but it gets her by. And so I was really surprised that I was a little surprised at the end when they did show that little sequence. It was more like a slideshow than it was an actual scene. But yeah, that series of moving images that kind of explained her background, which we'll get into in a little bit. But yeah, I really didn't expect it, and so that was a little more for me than I would have thought. So that's interesting. It's interesting that we see that a little bit differently. You wanted more. I personally probably would have been better with less. I think it would have been more powerful if we never knew about her at all, and had the details of her life kind of filled in by ourselves and left to the imagination. I think that would have been a bit more impactful, but maybe that's just me. As for my rating now, I'd probably have to give it honestly a 6 or a 6.5 out of 10. I wasn't as charitable as you, um, and I think the reason why I would have to do that, I just maybe I'm desensitized. I've seen a lot of movies like this that are kind of shocking for the sake of being shocking. Kind of disturbing for the sake of being disturbing. One of those movies in particular is this film called Gummo, which is an art film about these boys growing up in this kind of it's this shitty kind of rural midwestern town that's been hit by a tornado, and so everything's kind of fallen apart. The local infrastructure is kind of all over the place, and so these two kids they kind of ride their bikes around the neighborhood and they kill cats and sell them to like some shitty restaurant, and it's this mess, and it's supposed to represent kind of the cultural chaos that can occur in any part of the world, really. Even if you're in the United States of America, you can have these pockets of the nation that are really fucked up and lawless. It just the worse than the Wild West. I mean, they're sort of like these existential hellholes, and I think a lot like there's an aspect of that in here for sure in Edna, the inebriate woman. But I don't know. That film kind of did it better for me. Maybe it's because I watched it earlier, when I was like, maybe like 15 or 16. And so I kind of have that as like my rubric for every other film like this, similar to it, these kind of disorienting, more artsy kind of avant-garde, productions. But, yeah, I don't know. I had problems with this. I think, I had issues with it. I don't know. It was kind of too moralistic for me. Do you know what I mean? Like in the sense that the message was very transparent, and you could tell that the motivations of the writers were to clearly like spread awareness about this issue of homelessness in the United Kingdom, and that kind of bothered me a little bit. It pulled me out of the story. I wasn't really able to immerse myself as fully as I would have liked to in the actual film itself, in the narrative, because I couldn't stop thinking about how, like, how preachy it was at times. And I mean, there's literally that scene at the end where the woman is in the court. The woman who runs the house. What's her name? Josie Quinn. She runs the Jesus Saves house or whatever, and the one that gets shut down at the end. And she's sitting there in the court, and she's pleading her case to the judge, and the camera's like right in front of her, like her face is right up to the camera, and it's like she's saying it to you, the audience. And that was like the moment where I was like, this movie's preaching to me. I don't really like that. It's a little too heavy-handed, and especially that. And again, to go back to the scene where they're kind of covering her past or whatever, going through like what her dad didn't want her, walked out on the mother, and then the mother kind of spent like one night away from the kids to kind of regroup, but then that caused her to lose custody of her children in the end. And then it was a mess. They showed that whole thing. I I don't know. I thought it was a little too heavy-handed. I thought the acting was a bit poor, and the problem with that was supposed to be the culmination of the action, And so the most important scene in the movie is not like, it wasn't done as well as it could have been. I don't think. I think the acting was a bit over heavy-handed in that, and it was clunky. The whole thing was just clunky. The action was not what it was supposed to be, and that was the high dramatic point, in the film. And aside from that, there really is no structure. The first like 45 minutes or so are just Edna just getting kicked out of various places and just kind of wayfaring her way across the country, trying to just I don't know, just living like that, just being a vagrant the vagrant that she says she isn't. Um, and so it's a little difficult to when you kind of have nothing else but that one scene that really explains everything, and then it isn't even that good. I don't know. I can't really do anything but give it a 6 or a 6.5 in my opinion. I don't know. Are you willing to argue with me on any of those points? What do you think?
I think it would be better if they made it into a documentary rather than a film. I just realized the plus that you had told me about in the part that I think you really get into me about preaching her stuff or things that she believe in.
Oh, so yeah, you see it now,
It
right? She is
it.
preaching. She definitely is, isn't she?
Oh yeah, yeah, she is. I think just like you say, it don't have a proper structure. It's just her wandering in around the town, and then in the part that she met Josie, um, the house that they let her stay for a couple of months, I think. Then the preaching, then her backstory, and I think it didn't made it well. I'm still looking for something. There's not much structure, I think.
Yeah. What do you think that thing you're looking for is? Like, what do you think that would be to make this movie like more complete, like a bit better? What would that be for you?
The structure, I think the progression of the story, for example, the normal structure of climax, falling action, rising action. I don't see that there's that, and I don't know if it's okay if I'll change my mind about rating it. So maybe it's just 7 for me.
A 7. Okay. Interesting. I do agree with you on the with regard to like the issue of more conventional storytelling, but let me clarify my point a little bit here. I don't really think it's too bad. Like I don't think there's anything wrong with stream of consciousness. That it works a lot in literature, for example. Some of my favorite novels have been written in that sort of stream of consciousness style, where the characters just kind of walk around and do whatever, and nothing's really, it's not as constructed, and I like that. I like the fact that it's more realistic. The problem with this movie in particular is that they didn't do a good job with the stream of consciousness. Stream of consciousness at its best is supposed to feel natural. You're supposed to feel like what's going on could really happen and really is happening, and that's what pushes you in. That's what attracts you to the writing or the writing. Well, this is screenwriting, so but or the writing or the film or the TV show, whatever the piece of media may be. You know, Stream of consciousness is there to put you in. It's supposed to be immersive. It's supposed to put you in the headspace of whoever your characters are, And I never really felt that with Edna. I always felt that there was sort of this narrative distance between you and her thoughts and what was going on and like why she was the way she was, and then when they explained it again, it was clunky, it wasn't good enough, there's still this distance that you can't really afford to have. It would have been better if they had had like had a little more conviction about it, I think, and just not said anything about her at all. Can make her completely anonymous, make her vague, let you, the viewer, come up with a backstory for her if you want, but make it so that the film doesn't depend on a backstory in order for the character and the events to be impactful. I think that would have been better. Just leave it as this sort of minimalistic, a piece of storytelling, and leave it all open ended. I think by laying down a definite explanation for some of the things that were wrong with her and some of the reasons why she was where she was at the time of the narrative, at the time the film takes place, of course. I think it really kind of deflated its message a little bit by doing that. Um, and another thing I wanted to touch on, by the way, while we're on the subject, how did you feel about the actual recording of the movie? Because this was, because it's just some random YouTube video. This is just someone recording this on like a VHS. Like, did you have any problems like understanding the characters, like understanding their accents, understanding like or being able to see anything, being able to see because of the quality? Like, was that an issue for you while you were watching this?
Given that it's from the 1970s, uh, cinematography itself it's really poor. I think the recording on the YouTube. I'm looking for a subtitle, but there's none. So I keep my ear on listening on their conversation, or I have to have something to write on. Just like you say, this this movie lacks more on self character development. I mean, and she should be have some times on asking herself what's happening to her, on how she react on her environment, or what's happening, or how her minds affect her thoughts, or how her environment molds her as an individual, to ask more about herself, to be more think more about herself. That's what I'm looking. Think I haven't written any memorable quotes or lines of the characters. Lacks about that thing. About it wasn't leave any impactful messages of me about, for example, some quotations that will really describe the movie itself.
Right, yeah. It's not a very quote worthy movie. There were a few, but I didn't write them down because I didn't think. I kind of agree with you on that. I didn't think they were like good enough to write down, without trying to be mean about it. But yeah, I don't think. But at the same time, I don't think that a movie needs to be quotable in order to be good. I think that the beauty of fiction storytelling is that there's a lot of ways you can do it. There are a lot of different approaches you can go about. You can come into a story with, um, but again, going back to what I said earlier, I think the problem with Edna, the inebriate woman in particular, is just the fact that it had two main approaches. One, the first approach could have been to have it be kind of like an artsy avant-garde film, which is what it kind of was for the most part. Again, just a bunch of random, loosely related, kind of strung together vignettes about in the life of a homeless woman. In the life of an extremely debilitatingly um, alcohol dependent homeless woman, and they could have done that. They could have had it be a bit more of an experience, and that would have been the way to get the message through, I guess, to just have the viewer experience what it's kind of like, secondhand or maybe even third hand, depending on how you think of film connecting to people in relation to literature and whatnot. Anyway, second or third hand, being able to experience what it's like to actually be homeless, like getting to see kind of the ins and outs, the bitter realities of homelessness. That would have been very impactful. It would have been profound. But again, that one scene kind of kills it for me anyway. Um, but that's the first approach anyway, and then the second approach would be more like what you said, a documentary, strictly realistic, strictly objective, kind of empirical, with a film crew and everything, just kind of following real vagrants, real homeless people, and talking about their stories, doing like really like in-depth interviews with them, and just in recording their everyday doings and whatnot. That would have been more impactful as well, and for different reasons, and both of those are very strong approaches. And I kind of feel like the film, it doesn't want to choose a side. It kind of flubs it in the third act, because I think in a way it tries to be a little bit of both. But even more than that, I don't think it knows what it's doing exactly. And that could just be the time. It could just be the fact that it was made in 1971, and that maybe perhaps homelessness wasn't as big or as publicized and well known an issue as it is now. Maybe movies like this are the reason why people are so well educated on homelessness today. Maybe this was the step forward, and it's a product of its time, and that can't really be helped. And it isn't fair for us to kind of come into it with our 2021, because it is 2021 now, 3 days into it, mindset, and perspective on it. I could see that being a good counter argument to my points anyway. But yeah, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Just like to say, it doesn't have much story about yeah, trying to portray homelessness and being drunk. So I think it didn't did a good job regarding that stuff. About I don't know if she's really a drunk, or it's her impulses that, oh, I want to drink, and then she's drink, and then they will put her in the situation that she's homeless, and then there's not too much story about it. It's just some random thoughts or ideas. It could be the approach like on the books that you mentioned, that something that the character is wondering and having her thoughts. It didn't give you the sense that being in this situation, Edna, or being homeless, because the story it moves back and forth. It doesn't dwell in its own idea. I think in one consciousness, for example, being drunk, or being a homeless woman, and doesn't portray that well.
So you think a little more uniformity would have helped, a little more consistency, narrative consistency.
Uh, yeah, I think she, I think they just like you say, they're trying so many approaches in the movies. They didn't they to be more unified about they're talking about.
It does get confused in the third act. Yeah. But focused, I guess, to counterbalance that with a little more, a little more of the positives, because I did, after all, I did give it a 6.5, for a reason, because there are some good elements in here, and if you took away some of the bad, there would be a really, really good, really powerful film here, I think. For instance, I like how the tragedy in this movie, with Edna, it's not so much in the sense that, like, in the because all the government types and all the doctors and all these the authorities or whatever are authority figures are like assholes, and that they're all evil, and that they're all written to be like cartoonishly, on team bad guy or whatever. I like that the tragedy is in how real the situation is. The realism, there's some of it there. I mean, it is there. It's just not as competently, let's say, employed as it could be, perhaps. This isn't a movie where all the homeless people are good and innocent and holy. Like, we see that they it treats them all humanely, but realistically. It's very real in how characters interact and stuff. But the problem is that the tone is too persistent. I don't like that, because then it's like they put all of the moralizing into the narrative voice itself. I know that films don't necessarily have, narrators all the time, but there is, I do feel like, because the message is so transparent, like there is a sort of non-verbal narrator, but a narrator who does influence the lens with which you view these events. Nonetheless, I see that. A good example was the scene where she was just trying to talk to that where that person was on the phone. The guy was on the phone. It was a very minor scene at the very beginning. And she was like, "Is that phone call for me?" And the guy was like, "No, go away, leave me alone." And then she comes behind the counter, grabs the phone, and tries to like speak to whoever it is. Which later on, because of the ending, we find out that's supposed to be it's a manifestation of her abandonment issues and everything. She thinks that her father's going to be on the other line or someone like that, something of that vein. But yeah, I liked that little scene. I liked, and then the guy kicks her out, and he's a dick, and he is a bit harsh, but she's also crazy, and that's what I liked about that scene was that there was no one was good or bad in that. They were all various shades of gray morally. They were just people. They were just people trying to get by. That guy's got a store to run. He doesn't have time for this crazy homeless lady. And then on the other side of things, the crazy homeless lady is severely, damaged and traumatized and broken, and like she's had a really rough go of it. She's had a terrible life. And it would be nice if someone just treated her with a little bit of kindness, but at the same time, the situation stands as it is. That's what would happen in a circumstance like that, and that's what I liked that scene. But then 2 seconds later, it's like the movie starts preaching to me again. So there are moments, there are really good moments in this that just get kind of screwed over they get steamrolled by the message. Is there anything you'd like to comment to that before we move on to the next subject?
Yeah, I like the transparency that they didn't tell about the bad situation about the government, or that they're being care about the people. That's the reality, and then how they respond to the circumstances that are given them. For example, the courts or the people that she met, and then something like that. It's just doesn't have sort of its consistency on things. I think that's what I'm looking, the consistency of how does it how each situation resulted to other a consequence or something sort of things.
Okay.
That's what I'm looking.
So would you say you're more concerned, like, okay, so just real quick, like just in movies and TV shows and stuff in general, are you more concerned with the logical aspect of it, like the structural aspect of a story, or do you care more about the aesthetic aspect of it? And the aesthetic aspect would be more like I don't know, let's say like uh, people who like big emotional payoffs, and like the big scene at the end of the movie where the boy and the girl kiss or something, and it's all happy and you feel good because of it. um or again, do you prefer the logical approach, which is more just like tight story structure, all the right pieces in all the right places? Which one would you say you're more in tune with, if you had to pick one? You don't have to pick one if you don't
I
want to.
think I think uh, I think most movies have these two. This has their two elements, but I think I'm more involved on logical side. Given that into this movie, I'm looking for the more logical side than the emotional one, because it's already given the aesthetics.
Right, right, yeah. I would say I'm kind of the same, but yeah, I don't know. I think yeah, yeah, probably. Or wait, I don't know what I'd be. I honestly have no idea how I would term my own concerns when it comes to movies and shows and stuff. I think for me, it's more important for the experience to be worthwhile, and to the mark of a good movie for me is I come out of it and I say, I got something out of that. I learned something. I feel different. That's kind of how I like to judge my movies. And the reason why I gave this one a 6.5 out of 10 is because I can see where it could be the kind of movie that changes me coming out. Uh, but it just wasn't. It was kind of close at times, but it just wasn't. And there are a handful of, well, not just a handful, but a ton of other more competent, better made, just better movies that have really kind of kicked the shit out of me. While I was watching them, and then I came out of it and I was completely different. Learned something, felt a little more empathy for a certain group or whatever. Felt like I was taught like a lesson or something, but in a good way, not in a didactic way, but in an experiential way. And so I guess I would say when it comes down to it, I do focus more on that on the insight. That's the number one thing for me is insight. Does a movie provide interesting insight, or is it just shit? Does it do nothing? Is it a waste of time? That's how I judge mine. And it doesn't always have to be some deep, intellectual, philosophy heavy kind of, narrative. It doesn't have to be an Ingmar Bergman every single time. I get something out of, romantic comedies because they make you feel good, and it's nice, and you kind of learn a little bit about relationships through it, and you learn through the ideal. You learn what people want, and what people could hope for, and what they would ask for if the world was perfect. And so there's something you get out of everything, almost pretty much. And anyway, that's kind of that's my approach to this, and so that's what I'm trying to do when I analyze this. That's kind of my I guess my media criticism approach, I suppose. Before we move on, before we move on to the next few topics, is there anything you want to say real quick? I want you to do what I just did, so the audience knows. Tell them, explain real quick in brief what your media criticism approach is, real quick.
I think I'm looking for something that it will empower me. I mean, a movie doesn't always need to dwell on the philosophical side of life because each movie has their own story. I think they have some approach on things. For example, there's like to say, the romantic comedies there have their own story or their own message that they want to impart on you. I'm looking on basing things on how they impart these things on me, how they affect me as an individual, or what does I feel, or does it leave something on me after I watch the movie, or some story, or just I realize. Mm, in this in Edna, I think it's too general. I think it doesn't leave that much. I think I'm looking for something in the execution or how things went or their approach. I think I'm looking for the approach that it's some that uh looking for something that imparts in me, and that's what it's lack. But like you said, it has some potentials. So that's why I gave it a 7. Potential of the movie.
A 7. Okay. Interesting. And so we're basically on the same page when it comes to media criticism. So that's good. However, I do hope that we disagree eventually, because I don't like people who agree with everything. You know what I mean? That's not fun. That's not good for whatever. It's not productive. So hopefully hopefully we get to a point where we're at each other's heads about something. That's what I'm really looking forward to, and that's what I think the viewers of this podcast will get or listeners, I guess, will get a real kick out of eventually. But anyway, that's long down the road. To come back to the present now, to return to the present, let's talk a little bit about again more aesthetic matters. I have a few notes here. Let me pull them up real quick. So first of all, how did you feel about seeing her nude within the first couple minutes of the film? Because that opening, one of the opening scenes, she's in the showers, and that woman is kind of throwing away all her clothes, and because she says that she has some sort of illness, that's like her excuse to get in. So I think she said she might have had scarlet fever or something, something like that. In any case, she has to like burn her clothes. She pours gasoline all over them, and she throws away her alcohol as well. But Edna's naked, and she's naked, and you see her bits, I guess. I mean, I don't want to be crude about it, but you do see her in the nude. Why do you think they did that? What do you think the motivation behind having her, you know, just stripped down to her, just her completely vulnerable self in front of the viewer? What do you think the motivation behind that was, and how did it make you feel as a viewer?
They did it for a good start of the story to introduce her as a as a character. I think it doesn't concern me that much, given that she I thought it was a home for the agent, for the aged. I think first part, so it doesn't concern me anymore that he stripped down and get naked, showered.
Would you say you see it as a metaphor for her, symbolism for her, just a little visual metaphor for her, you know, the movie laying her life bare, or trying to anyway, trying to lay her life bare by showing the ins and outs of homelessness and then eventually exploring her past. Do you think that was foreshadowing for that? Do you think there's something to be? Do you think I'm onto something when I interpret it as such?
Maybe it could be a part of sort of metaphor, but I don't know. But I think it's just a an act or part of the film to just introduce her character. That's what I see it.
So you don't think there was any deeper significance to it? You think it was just a vehicle to just bring her in, to be practical and to just go, hey, this is the character, here she is. Then next scene, move on. You don't think there's any deeper significance to it? You think I'm looking too far into it?
No, I think you're right about the metaphors. Um, it could be a way to tell who she is and a way to for us to know her, but uh, I don't know. It's pretty common. I think that to introduce her in that way, but it made me feel that to us who she really is. That scene.
Do you watch a lot of movies where the female characters just kind of strip down in like the within the first 5 minutes?
Mm, not really. I remember any.
No, because it's just that you said it was common though. What do you mean by what aspect of it is common if it's not the stripping down and getting naked? Um, what aspect of it would you say is common in a lot of films to introduce her like that? Just to clarify.
It's common. I think, for example, a woman dressing up um in the shower or man just getting a swing. I think I see it's like that.
Well, that's interesting, yeah, because and it's also interesting to contrast this particular instance of that kind of motif or cliche or however you want to term it with most of the other ones too, because I mean, she's kind of doing that typical kind of character, morning or afternoon routine or whatever, hygiene routine. And it's funny that pretty much in everything else, just like in real life, everyone else who's doing it is usually they got a house, they've got running water, it's all theirs. They're not homeless. So I think it's interesting in a way. It's so cliched that it's morbid. The fact that she's doing all these regular mundane things, but she's homeless. All the while. It's not like that. It's not like this is just a typical like teen movie or something where the high school kid has to like he woke up late. He has to run to the shower, and it's his shower, and it's his house. And he's got clean clothes, and he's got food, and he doesn't have to worry about anything. And it's this typical shit. And then you got this one though, and it's a shower and it's everything, but the clothes are getting burnt. Her clothes are getting burnt because she's pretending to have some disease so that she can just have a meal, and get through the night, a place to stay that night. It's just it's fucked up. And it's interesting. Yeah, it's like a little inverted. It could be. I think at this point I'm starting to look into it a little too deeply, but it's just it kind of gets me thinking about it a little bit. And that would have been, if they had done it deliberately, that would have been a nice touch. And so, you know, anyway, um, next aesthetic concern I wanted to get into. Why do you think androgyny is so prevalent throughout the film? And if you don't know what androgyny is, both you and the viewers, in case you don't know, it's the state of having both kind of male and female, not just genitalia, but just aspects, traits. You're both masculine and feminine at the same time. Um, and if you don't remember what I'm talking about in the movie specifically, there are a lot of scenes at the beginning. There's that conversation she has with that woman, the girl at the beginning when they're walking down the side of the road and they get that ride from that guy who was asking for directions in the blue car. That girl said that she was half and half, and she was talking about how she got her girlfriend pregnant. So she's lesbian, but she got her girlfriend pregnant apparently obviously the scientific explanation for that is that her girlfriend is getting, is having sex with guys on the side or whatever. But anyway, it's androgynous. It has to do with androgyny, and then also second instance of this, there was that the person that looks like a guy, with the scarf and the black coat, who promises Edna that they'll get her into the shelter for free. They sneak her into the shelter, but then she gets kicked out. She isn't allowed to eat. She gets kicked out. But before that, though, she's showing her pictures. The person is showing her pictures and talking about their husband, and then turns out that the last picture is a picture of that person when they were younger, and it turns out that she was a woman. She was a pretty attractive woman who had a wife and kids, and the life on the streets has made her um it's messed her up so much that she looks like a guy now. The difference is it's turned the streets have turned her into like a crooked old man almost. What do you think the significance behind that is? We have two instances of androgyny, you know there. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that's the case?
I think it's part of addressing about how these people losing their identity throughout being a vagrant. I think I agree with you that I agree with you that that girl about this getting her getting her girlfriend pregnant thing, and then this old man. I thought he's really a guy. Most character of the movie, I thought they're a guy, but it ends up that they're girls. I think. What's the point of it is that how people lost their identity throughout this journey of being vagrant. I think and homelessness.
Yeah, I think you're onto something with that identity. That's exactly what I was thinking. The theme of identity and what it consists of. That it raises some really interesting questions about that. It's like, how do we define ourselves within the society? You've got all these people who are vagrants. They are wayfarers. They just kind of they wander through life, and they're always changing. Edna's always changing her last name to get benefits from the people or whatever. No one is really bound to anything at all. They're all, and she says it early in the scene where she's having a conversation with one of that kind of portly homeless woman that she met in line in the very beginning again, in that little village or whatever, where she said, it's freeing, it's free. They kind of there's it's not fun, it's not great to be homeless, but there is a sort of a freedom to it. It's not there are very few things in this world that can be all bad, and in a certain respect there is this sort of existential liberation that comes with the state of homelessness. And it's interesting, and I wish that they did touch upon it a little more, because it is a complex issue. And I think if you gave that aspect of it, that angle, a little more coverage, a little more exposure perhaps, you could have something really interesting to work with artistically, aesthetically, intellectually, politically, perhaps socially. It kind of works on all levels for me anyway, and I think it would work that way for a lot of people as well, a lot of other people. But it is interesting, and I think that has a lot to do with it. Gender. These people, and it also reminds me of how Edna, and a lot of them, they get their kids taken away. They were mothers, but then they had their children taken away. She was taken away from her mother. She had a kid. She had an abortion, and then she had a miscarriage rather, and then she had her kid taken away from her, and that's it. That's the whole thing. We don't know anything about her own kid. We never get to see Edna's child. Whatever happened to her. Probably the same thing. It's probably just this never ending cycle. Um, and and it reminds me of the very ending, the very last scene where she and the other woman from the home, before the home was shut down, they were walking together, and then she says, I'm going to go this way, and she abandons that other person who kind of saw, maybe not necessarily a motherly figure in Edna, but something, an older, mentor, a friend, just someone to go through hell with, the hell that is homelessness with. But Edna abandons her just like her parents abandoned her, and it's just it's this cycle, and it has a lot to do with identity. She doesn't want to be associated with, there's a part of her because of that, because she's so damaged. She doesn't want to be a part of anything. She fears that. She's afraid of association. It's this fear of association, pretty much. And it's this love hate thing. She gets kicked out of places. She scorns them. She gets out. She has her pride. She's very bipolar about it. And I think that last scene really does sum up, her whole issue, kind of, the whole crux of the story, because this is I would say it's less an exploration in homelessness and more a character study, because a lot of what happens is, you know it's paradoxically, it is simultaneously, um too universal and too specific to be of much practical use. I'd say much practical help as a film on homelessness or whatever. But yeah, I think that last scene where she leaves the other person behind, the other girl behind, and sticks it out on her own. I think that has a lot to do with the fear of association, the fear of identity. She's gone on so long without identity that, and the identity she did have was shit anyway. She was poor. She was part of the lower class, especially in the UK, England, and it's a very the United Kingdom is a very classist nation. A very classist country. Class is everything, and you see that with the rich people in the court. And the judges and everything, who are the one instance of, I would say, of like kind of those two-dimensional kind of cartoony villains. But it makes sense, because that is still within the parameters of reality, I would say. They're out of touch because they are part of the upper class. They don't need to care about the lower class. They look down on them because they are beneath them in a certain sense, in an economic, social sense. So yeah, I think, Edna's biggest problem is her fear of identity, her rejection of identity, because the identity she was given at birth was not good, and it hurt her, and it got her into a lot of shit. It made her miserable. It ruined her life. And so now she wants to live without it, but living without it isn't much better, because it also keeps her from being happy. She and that other woman could have been friends. That could have been like a daughter to her or something. They could have they could have stuck it out together. I don't know. It might have even helped her quit drinking. It might have even helped her, rehabilitate. They could have helped each other. But she rejected that, and yeah, and I think a lot of homeless people are like that at the same time. Um, I do. And so it was interesting going back to the very beginning of this podcast, when you were talking about how the Filipino homeless community is a little more close knit than other homeless communities in other nations and other parts of the world. Let's say, that's why I thought that was so interesting, because I think Edna is actually, she's a very common case among the homeless, but at the same time, again, the movie narratively, it focuses too much on her as a character, and that's why I would say it's more of a character study than a like a bona fide exploration of homelessness, let's say. But I've been rambling a little bit. What do you think about identity? Do you have any comments, concerns, anything you want to argue? What do you think? What are your thoughts?
I think Edna doesn't have a exact personality or identity. I think just like I just say, he uses different names, or trying to look like a man to get some access to some uh, just a place to sleep or stay the night. And especially he has nailed it about the uh, his problem with attachment to people. I know you know that she met a lot of people. For example, the first old woman that uh, she stayed with the night in a barn. Then the woman, he been in the car, and then especially the last part found when she part with the girl. And she can be with anybody that she wanted to, or she can find someone to stay or the journey together, but it's afraid it's her identity. No, no, it's just her identity or something.
Her identity. Sorry. That was a little unprofessional. I was just typing something. but I was listening to what you were saying, and yeah, I that was a good example, by the way. I completely forgot about the when she pretended to be a guy to she stole some guy's ID and pretended to be a man to try to get help from social services or whatever. Did not work, but still, again, going back to androgyny, going back to loose, conceptions of identity. Um, I guess now just we have kind of I think we have kind of covered all the bases of the film, but I wanted to know personally what did you think of the social worker, the woman who ran the house? What did you think of her? Did you like her character? Do you think she was likable? What are your thoughts?
I think she's just maybe she has some background story about these things, or she have done something wrong in the past, so that's why the reason why she's trying to save many people. So maybe just consequence of her action, making her to look a bit better or feel better about helping people.
Helping people. Do you think she's a genuinely good person though, or do you think she just I don't know? Do you think she's a genuinely good person?
She could be a good, genuinely good person, but I think I don't think that she's just really wanted to help people. I think something of her past experiences that affects her to be that way, to act in that way, to build that house and help these people. Maybe something like that.
Okay. And do you think people like her could exist in real life, or do you think she was purely fictional creation?
People like that did exist in real life.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, it's good. Good to be optimistic. I personally kind of again, I thought a lot of the preachiness kind of came from her. It wasn't every scene, but I think her character was kind of it was a little too. That was where I got really pulled out of the movie, and I was like, okay, whoever wrote this is trying to get me to is trying to sermonize to me, and I don't really I don't know. It kind of bothered me a little bit. But anyway, we're already approaching our hour mark. In this, I guess, inaugural, no, not inaugural, let's just say pilot episode of the Imperial Tides podcast, which will hopefully become a regular thing very shortly, very soon. I'm hoping anyway. I don't know about you, Simone, but I'm hoping to make this a daily occurrence. What would you say to that? One a day, perhaps, an episode a day.
That would be a great idea. I think it's helped me a lot. I think, especially my broken English. Forgive me, the audience.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. Has it helped
it'll
you?
be
Besides language, though, language skills. Has it helped you kind of analyze? We only did one, but did it help you kind of understand the movie a bit better to sit down and talk about it afterwards?
yeah. It really helps me to get a grasp of what their movie is really all about. I think seeing, knowing your views on things, on different takes on part of the movies, I think that's a great experience. I dwell only on my own, own opinions about the movie.
And that is the very point of this podcast, ladies and gentlemen. We are trying to get different perspectives here. We're trying to kind of step outside of ourselves. I'm trying to learn something from Simone. Simone's trying to learn something from me. And you guys are here to learn, I guess, from, well, not that we have anything, is particularly productive to teach, but, that's what it's about. That's kind of the point. And so I hope that it was helpful in that regard. I hope that it was effective. I hope it wasn't a 6.5 out of 10 podcast episode for the start. Everything has a bit of a rough start, but I honestly think this is some of the best work I've ever done on YouTube. And it went a lot better than I expected it to. So before we end, I want to have one final segment where I ask a brief "Would you rather" question. I'll have Simone answer first, but just a little fun thing to kind of end things off because I don't know how else to end things off. Really, it would be kind of awkward to just kind of go, "Okay, done, slam, that's it." So, Simone, tell me this: Would you rather know how you're going to die or when you're going to die? How or when, and explain why. How or when?
think how, 'cause, when you know when, it doesn't give you uh, a sense of surprise. I mean, that's pointless, but you know what you're going to die, and then doesn't give you an excitement or the fear of you're going to die.
And how would you? What's your ideal way of dying if you had to pick one?
Maybe the common death about sleep the night and then waking up in the morning. Maybe that's the more humane or less painful way to die.
That was exactly what I was gonna say. Just that long sleep. It's morbid. It's messed up. But it was a messed up movie, so I kind of had to connect it a little bit. Kind of. I don't know. Not to be disrespectful to anyone who's homeless or struggling with homelessness or knows anyone who's homeless. It's not what we're trying to do here. Just to clarify. I hope you guys didn't think that. I hope we're all friends here. But anyway, and also I guess just I guess to get a little more deep. What age would you say you want to die at if you could pick how long you live? Like what would the number be for you? How old would you want to be when you die?
I think 70. Because I think
70?
I'm 50 years old. It wasn't enough to enjoy my life. It's about 20 to 30 years old. It would be work, work, and work, and raising kids, and then I don't know. And then when you, I want some to enjoy some retirement about 20 years before I die.
20 years before you die? Yeah, I was gonna. I would say in a perfect world or whatever, I would live to 120. And I would be in a nice retirement home, perfect retirement home, and I would read as many books as possible in those last years, just because you never know when you're gonna die. Once you hit like 90 or something, you never know, or 80 even, you never know, how much longer you got. That's what I would do. I would read as many books as possible. At the very end of my life, I would live to 120, and I would have, I don't know, read like all the greats, whatever, American, British, Trinidadian, whatever kind of literature. I'd read it all, and I'd also get to see a bunch of cool shit too. Like I don't know, maybe uh, first manned mission to Mars, hopefully in our lifetime. I hope I get to see that. It's definitely what I would like. As for the would you rather, I didn't even answer it. I would probably do. That's a tough one for me. So yeah, I don't know. Um, I take these things super seriously. I know that they're just hypotheticals, but like, damn, I really don't know how or why or when. How or when. I would. Oh, fuck. I would do how probably because then I don't know. I feel like I'd probably just not do whatever that thing was. Hopefully it's something crazy like skydiving or some shit. Hopefully it's not something like, just you're driving and then a fucking brick from some truck in front of you dislodges itself and smacks you right in the face and you're dead like that. I hope it's not like that because then I would never drive again. But I guess you can't pick these things. But I would pick between the two. I'd say that's the lesser evil. Finding out how. Um, but yeah, like I said, we are approaching the end. Are there any last things you want to say about Edna, about the Would You Rather, about anything at all? You want to promote anything? You want to talk about yourself? I don't know. Just vamp for me real quick. I gotta look something up. I'm not gonna lie. I gotta look something up real quick. So just talk, Simone. I will give you the floor for a little bit. Go ahead. Feel free to say whatever you want.
Maybe uh, I'll talk about all the things that we have done. Segment for tonight. It's really a good experience regarding about knowing. It's just when I watch movies, I think I didn't give much attention about um uh, figuring out its species, trying to understand the movie. Uh, this must be the best way to do that. Especially, I may agree with you with the how would you die. I think it's better to know how you will die to es- um, escape whatever if it's a stupid way to die.
Okay. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to the end of the very first episode of the Imperial Tides podcast. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, uh, please feel free to like, subscribe, share. Tell all your friends. Tell all your friends. Bring a bunch of people over here. Let's have a party. Next episode. We'll have a great time. I don't know. I don't know. I got nothing. But I will close with a nice little quote from the great Henry Miller. Man has demonstrated that he is master of everything except his own nature. And I think that ties in perfectly to Edna, the Inebriate Woman, 1971. Play for today. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been Holden Caulfield, 21st century Holden Caulfield. And we had the great and eminent Simone. And this has been the Imperial Tides podcast. I am going to end it now. Take care, and see you in the next one.